I remember thinking that we were taking a huge, reckless, romantic leap into the unknown buying a farm. I've since come to realise it is just literally just the next cliche in the book of rock cliches. Rock gentlemen end up living, you either die or end up living on a farm. It was all I did for 15 years, all day, every day. And when it's, what you do ask yourself when you're swinging off the chandelier in the Britannia Hotel in Liverpool at 25, what happens after this? And the answer is actually it does get big. The farm years are just as good as the swinging off the chandelier years.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is the bass player from Blur. Alex James is actually probably best known these days as a famous farmer. In fact, he was writing about being a famous farmer and all the disasters of being one of those long before Jeremy Clarkson ever did The Farm. But he is also a sort of intermittent pop star, and he's written a book called Over the Rainbow about Blur getting back together and going back out on tour. And it's a lot of fun.
Well, it was a hell of a year. I had no intention of writing a book until about 3/4 of the way through, when I suddenly realised actually this has got a really nice shape to it. I didn't even know how it was going to end at that point, but it was an enchanted year actually.
And how did it actually begin? Because you say it kind of began with a phone call out of the blue.
All stories begin with a stranger comes to town. I think that's the basic premise of all stories. And the first time Blur split up was shortly. It was exactly the time that I got married. Claire and I, in fact, bought the farm on our honeymoon. At which point, Blur suddenly stopped without me knowing that was going to happen.
Did you actually break up? Or was it just stopped?
It never, it was sort of went into hiatus. I think Graham left. I think whatever you do, however brilliant it is, like after 15 years of doing it, it certainly happens with all bands. Everybody just wanted to go off and do something else. I think, unfortunately, we were doing it day in, day out for 15 years. Fortunately, we were still young enough, I think, to have enough energy to kind of. Everybody did go off in different directions, and Claire and I. Bought the farm on our honeymoon. We hadn't known each other for very long. It was all very sudden. So I found myself living in the countryside with a girl that I didn't really know, with not really any transferable skills. I was really good at playing the bass really loud, eating cheese and drinking champagne. So yes, writing a column about that was really what enabled me to kind of reinvent myself. But the last 20 years, when we bought the farm, the guy we bought it off was crawling out on his knees. It'd been a horrendous time for British farmers. Every time you saw a farmer on telly, and it was always a man, was in tears. There had been like foot and mouth outbreak, mad cow disease was huge. It had been a really, really tough time. And when you think of a farmer now, it's Jeremy Clarkson laughing his head off. But
you didn't have the millions of Amazon behind you doing the farm.
So Claire and I have basically, spent 20 years just pouring everything, all our resources, all our love, all our energy into turning the farm from a derelict kind of shipwreck into this whirring, whizzing wonderland. Actually, and the more time you spend on a farm, that the harder it is to leave it alone. And the fact that there's been a kind of a real buoyancy around British food and where it comes from. The part of the world where we live, it is right in between Jeremy Clarkson and Dalesford, who are they're world-beating farmers.
But where did your interest come from? Because I haven't met you since your wedding day. I came to your wedding because my ex used to work with Claire in music video, and it was an amazing affair because it was very rock and roll. but there you were, going into farming, and I remember thinking at the time, this is really weird. Like, why? Because you're not from the countryside.
I'm not at all. I think I remember thinking that we were taking a huge, reckless, romantic leap into the unknown buying a farm. I've since come to realise it is just literally just the next cliche in the book of rock cliches. Rock gentlemen end up living, you either die or end up living on a farm. It's the Voltaire said, happy ever after is a garden. It felt like Blur had stopped being like the full-time. It was all I did for 15 years, all day, every day. And when it stopped, what you do ask yourself when you're swinging off the chandelier in the Britannia Hotel in Liverpool at 25, what happens after this? And the answer is actually it does get big. The farm years are just as good as the swinging off the chandelier years, and the fact that British food was. We were starting to rediscover lost recipes and the rise to prominence of the television, brilliant television programming, brilliant chefs, Jamie Oliver, and a slew of
artisan
others.
Cheese suddenly became
so that was British dairy farmers. Who couldn't make a profit out of milk, to diversify, great farm business diversification, making a product rather than a commodity. You can kind of set the price of a product. The French have always been really good.
But you didn't know anything about this.
I didn't know anything. I didn't really know.
So how did you know what to do?
I joined a band before I could play an instrument. I think it's the best way of learning is to do it as you go along.
Is that right then? So what? You didn't really play bass?
No. I wanted to play keyboards, which would have been a disaster, because the good thing about bass is that you can kind of hack it. I think keyboard or even guitar to a certain extent, you kind of need somebody to show you what to do. You need kind of training. But with the bass, it's really just one note at a time, and you can literally, if you got an ear, you can kind of cop. So I just learned by playing along to my favourite records. But so
why did they want you in the band if you didn't, if you weren't a musician?
Well, nobody was.
Mates?
But we were. But just, this is going back 40 years. No, what's it? Yeah, 40 years. Yeah. Music was the focus of all culture. It was. Everybody in my class was in a band, and the one who wasn't was like the manager. So I was in a band, and we'd made T-shirts, and we had a look before we'd even kind of worked out how to do the other bit. But it turns out actually making music, so few people actually call themselves musicians these days. It feels like you have to be number one in 15 countries before you can say yes, I'm a musician. And then someone else will call you out because you didn't. Where there's now a plasma screen telly, there used to be a piano, and everyone would sit around it in the evenings singing. And it's actually a wonderful thing to do, to play music and to sing. It's great listening to music, but it's great watching football. But when actually playing football, you don't have to be Lionel Messi to kind of enjoy a really good game of football. You don't have to be Taylor Swift to enjoy strumming on a guitar.
Well, I want to come back to both farming and bass, but let's come back to the story of the year.
Yeah.
Because how did you get back together then?
So yeah, phone call, Wembley, yes, definitely, and then so we agreed to that. No, I mean, we didn't really. It's a long time since we played, and you never really know if anyone's interested.
And what was driving it? Because you didn't need the money as individuals. Or maybe you did.
That stuff always comes in handy. I don't think any of us have ever seen Blur as a kind of commercial proposition, but it's just the time. I think the time was right. It'd been a while, and I suppose anything that might have happened was kind of kicked into touch by lockdown. That sort of delayed everything for a year or two. So it had been a very long time since we'd even spoken, really, or had a meeting, let alone played together. So you don't really know what the appetite's like until you put tickets on sale. Turned out the appetite was ravenous, and so we put on a second night. The first night sold out in like 5 minutes, so we put a second night on. To which Claire responded, Harry Styles is doing 4. Keeping it, I think the sort of family keeping it real thing is a theme that continues throughout the book, and on the back of those Wembley shows, the band were then booked in to play other massive festivals around the world, like Roskilde in Denmark is a huge one, and Summer Sonic in Japan. Like, summer's suddenly ramping up into a whole weekend of hedonistic, a whole summer of hedonistic extravaganzas. And then I realised the end of summer is when we have a festival on our farm. So it's all kind of ramping up into this kind of mayhem blur appearing across the globe on kind of on the biggest possible scale. But I think what makes it an interesting story is kind of dealing with that, which is actually easy peasy. Like playing the bass in a rock band is like riding a bicycle downhill. It's a kind of knack, but it's that, but just in counterpoint with, I think maybe a lot of people my age can hopefully relate to, being a kind of expanding waistline father of impossible teenage children with cash. Actually, it played havoc with the cash flow because I couldn't commit to any work while we were.
You don't get paid.
You don't get paid till after you've delivered a record or after you've done it. So hopefully it's kind of, so this sense of kind of just this. I guess living on I live quite a monastic existence, actually, in the isolation. The farm is kind of like maybe that's why.
By monastic, you don't mean abstemious. You mean you mean quiet.
To us, I think the book's all about like how the hell do you find a balance, not just across all areas of life. And no, actually, going back to the farm it keeps me out of trouble. And people say music and cheese, that's weird, but monks sang in the morning, made cheese in the afternoon. We've gone into winemaking, and monks did that as well. And actually, festivals were all initially religious festivals. So there's this kind of sense of kind of mad monkery, but the whole thing is just always on the point of teetering into claps of kind of everybody going into jubilatory drunken Rasputin dancing and tweaking their muscles doing the splits, and hopefully there's a sense of enchantment about Blur right from the very beginning, and so hopefully I laughed my head off as
you get a real sense of that. I mean, I think in a way the book is also about friendship.
100%.
And it's really interesting because you've actually written it really just from your point of view, talking about you and the family. You haven't kind of, I suppose you've respected the privacy of the other band members.
Yeah.
But I mean, it starts with the revelation that you haven't really been in touch, and you're not really friends in that sense by at that point, are you? I mean,
it's not show friends, it's show business. But it was starting to.
Why weren't you in touch? Because that's a bit weird. Sort of like you talk about a meeting that had gone really badly.
We did have a meeting. Like, can we do this? And maybe the time wasn't right, or I don't know. But it just afterwards it just wasn't in a good place.
You call it a car crash?
Was it a fight? No, it wasn't. It wasn't a fight. It was just bad. It was just bad-tempered, and it just felt like, okay. And when something hasn't happened for 8 years, you start to wonder, will it just keep drifting apart? The longer it goes on, the harder it is to pull it all back together. And Blur is such a huge part of who all 4 of us are. Actually, it's part of my daily consciousness. I think about even if I didn't think about them without being reminded of them, somebody would remind me, or I'd hear a song, or a song would pop into my head. So it's just a lot of bands do end up hating each other. Like this
is that where you get to there? Because I mean, you talk about the fact that you got together in the first place and that you joined a band without really playing bass means that you must have been great friends.
Well, so I kind of worked out a few chops by the time Blur started. I mean, the incredible thing, but there's a genuine sense of enchantment about the whole of the Blur scenario. Graham was the very first person I clapped eyes on when I arrived in London. He was getting out of his parents' car holding a guitar, and the other side of the car park, I was getting out of my parents' car holding it with a guitar.
Where was this?
Goldsmiths College Halls of Residence in
right, when you were going to college.
Camberwell.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So literally, first day of college, across the car park, Clock Graham, and he had the room next to me, and he took me to meet Damon and Dave, and at our very first rehearsal, we wrote a song that we still played this summer. Like, it was absolutely boom.
Which
instant.
song was that?
She's So High. So it's just kind of crazy that the first person I saw when I arrived in London, the first time we tried to do something, it was just there was an instant chemistry there,
so you must
straight away.
I mean, what I mean is you must have missed them.
I did, yes, as friends and yeah. I mean, we went through so much together. I mean, I think we do all tend to go down to our own rabbit holes and just get really absorbed in what we're doing. And in fact, that's what enables us all to come back to the table, because we've got something new to bring to the party, hopefully. But I just felt that, like, maybe that was it. It was, you know, it was making every day when I thought about Blur, it was like, But, you know, by the end of the year, well, you need to read the book. But,
and you basically sort of lay out how it's all, you know, having said yes, it's then also a bit of a nightmare, because like many of us our age, you've filled it out with time.
Word. I mean, that was, yeah. I mean,
and suddenly the
was,
idea of sort of standing on stage being a thin bass player is...
All the stuff that was easy when I was 19 is now, you know, almost impossible. I put a lot of weight on in lockdown. You know, I live in a food machine. I'm surrounded by chefs because we spend the whole year devising a food festival. I was seriously overweight, and there was very much a hard dead. You can't start pointing super troopers at fatties. You know, it just doesn't work. So it was slightly terrifying that it's normally like being in a band that kind of leads to excess and you know, over the top overindulgence. And Blur was basically going to be kind of a balancing factor. You know, rock and roll. It was rock and roll rehab. I was using my band to get fit again.
Yeah.
And I went to.
How much did you end up losing?
Well, the 2nd of January. I went to Decathlon in Oxford to buy some running shoes. I found the guy, said, "Have you got any running shoes?" He said, "Who for?" And that was a burner. Just thought, I'm going to go to the gym twice a day every day until I can fit back into the old the trousers that I wore last time Blur were together. And I hung them up in the office above the table and just started grunting and groaning for all I was worth. And my word, it was painful.
But it's quite tricky, isn't it? I mean, because I also went on a massive weight loss thing last year, because I did Strictly, and I lost 15 kilos in the space of about a month and a half.
Yeah, they say crash diets don't work, but you know, if you want to lose a lot of weight quickly,
it works. But then what's hard is then what happens afterwards.
Yes, yeah. And that's always the problem. I mean, that's what this book's all about. Like, what happens next? Yeah, I think it's something that you just have to kind of, like, being active. It's so easy to just sit there staring at screens all day. Well,
except in 10 years' time, everyone will be on Ozempic, won't they?
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
Because it's not only is it the easy way, but it's also. They're going to tell us that it's great.
Can make you live longer, or
living longer and dementia and all those sorts of things.
Really.
So I suspect it won't be the age of the gym. It might be the age of being thin and a bit healthier.
But it's funny that
that will stop us enjoying food as well, won't
it? Maybe. But it was a struggle. But the great thing about going to the gym is that I remember in the car on the way to the studio on the first day, because we decided we'd make a new record as well. I was absolutely cacking it on the way there, because I thought, what band doesn't hate each other 30 plus years in, and I literally was racking my brains and couldn't think of another band who made a half decent record, you know, that far into their career. It's really, really unusual. So that was kind of terrifying.
So what was it about playing again? Because you say it was actually quite easy to play again once you started again.
Yeah, so on that first day on the M40, dreading it, I got there at 11 o'clock. The drummer was there, 11 o'clock as advised. So we waited for an hour for the singer and the guitar player to turn up. Yeah, oh, how's this going to go? Literally, by the time we broke for lunch, we had a master take in the bag. It was just bang, all snapped back together instantly, because we spent so many years. I remember so many years doing it. I remember saying to Dave, the drummer, on that lunch break, that was easy. How was that easy? If you do anything for 30 years, it's easy.
Had you been prepping? Had you been working on new stuff before you got there?
But I mean, we all play with other bands. Just before January 2020, I'd always wanted Nile Rodgers and Chic to do Feastival. And January 2020, Niall's manager came for lunch, and he's a vegan, and I made a real effort making him some really nice falafels. The falafel sealed the deal, and he gave me a box set of everything Nile Rodgers has ever done on vinyl, which is a princely gift. It was wonderful. And then lockdown happened. And no festivals took place. But all festival organisers, there's a kind of tacit agreement. We'll stick with the headliners that we've got until this all blows over. And Niall very kindly agreed to let me play bass with them at Festival. Yeah. And actually, I spent a huge amount of time in lockdown.
It's quite a challenge, given how quite fast his music is.
I spent a long time in lockdown just playing along to those records, and actually it was great. I had an extra year because it literally took me more than a year to learn how to play like that. But Johnny Marr said a wonderful thing about Chic. He said, "You listen to that music, it sounds like Friends," and I do think it has that quality. And actually, I think the Ballad of Darren, the new Blur album, I think it has that quality, which is that it's just feels really relaxed and accomplished and mature. It's not kind of trying to be. It's just for grown men expressing themselves, and you can hear the friendship. You can hear the enjoyment. You don't work music, you play music, and in that sense, so this thing that felt like a big challenge was actually instantly and wonderfully simple, just a joyous thing. I think guitar players and singers maybe need to feel like they've suffered a little bit or they haven't turned up for work, but playing the bass in a rock band, it's like riding a bike downhill.
But there was a maturity to that record when it came out.
Yes.
That where everyone went, oh, this makes sense now. This is not just a bunch of old guys getting together for the money. There's some sort of alchemy going on.
But I guess there always has been, and Damon's always been really good at, because it's whatever you do, not just music. It's so much easier to do it exactly the same as you've got. To change is it's really difficult, and in business it's expensive, and R&D, what do they call it, R&D. There was a lot of R&D kind of went into this record. I guess it would be a.
And who is Darren?
Darren is actually Blur's security guy. He's worked for us for years and years and years. It was the first time we really smashed it at a gig. She's So High, our first single, had just come out, and I remember meeting the boys and Nutty Nev Skinner, who was the guy with the VW camper who used to drive us and our gear around. Like, we could literally all fit into a VW camper van with all the kit in the back. Meeting him at King's Cross, driving up to the Black Country, to Dudley in the West Midlands on a Friday night, and She's So High had a little bit of evening play on radio, and there was a little bit of a buzz about it, and we got to this place we'd never been before, and there was people came to see us, and people kept bringing us beer and buying us beer, and we went on and we played, and that was the first time we the first time something happens is always that's always really, really special, and that was the first time we really nailed it. So Darren was there that night and came back afterwards, and actually someone else who still works for us now, Stuart, who's a key part of the crew. They just became part of the family, and there was a ballad that Damon had written that was a half-finished. It was called Half a Song. It was on an album of demos that Damon released, all going back to 20 years. Demo Crazy. It was called Half a Song on that, and Smoggy just kept on and on and on at Damon. You've got to finish that song. You've got to finish that song. And so I think Damon just wrote it was called The Ballad of Darren. That was a working title of that song. The ballad that Darren had been encouraging and pestering him to finish. So that's a long answer to the question, who is Darren? But Darren is...
he's a real person.
Yeah, Smoggy, also known as.
What about the sort of life on tour then? Because I mean, life on tour with Blur the first time around was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean
there was a lot of drink and drugs and girls and
so
all that.
Well, the first book was Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. This is kind of Wife and Kids and Rock and Roll. I wondered how the kids would react to Blur. I didn't know what they'd make of it. They were too young. The eldest was in short trousers last time around. Whenever I play the piano or the guitar at home, they're like, "Shut up, fatty." It's it's hard, but. I really didn't know what they'd make of it, but from the moment they all came to the first one of the very early warm-up shows in Eastbourne, which I think
I was there. Yeah, I came to. Yeah.
So I mean, the older ones all got drunk immediately and fell over and started going absolutely mental. But my youngest daughter, who's 14, I knew where she was standing. They put her on the viewing platform, and. It was when they switched the lights on. You literally you can't see anything. But the first time the house lights came up, I knew where she was standing, and I glanced. I stole a glance over there, and she was like head back, arms aloft, and I just burst into tears. It was like you could see the music was just totally connecting with her. Just so teenage kids are. They're notorious. They're even trickier than the singers and guitar players to connect with.
So was that the first time you felt they were proud of you as a...
Yes. So literally all I was getting was "shove off, fatty," and actually more colourfully phrased than that.
Because it's odd for their generation, because a lot of that generation are back into... my kids are listening to Blur and Oasis and 90s indie and all that stuff.
It's insane. Yeah, the ticket sales were mainly going out to 18 to 31-year-olds. So there's this incredible sense of like Blur have found this whole new audience, and alongside all the people who kind of grew up with it, there's this whole new slew of kind of.
But yours didn't want to know because it was you.
Well,
because you always reject what your own parents do.
Like I say, not like.
Well, it's like my kids don't watch the news.
Yeah, no, exactly. Come listen to this Blur record, kids. It's great. I hope they read the book. They instantly. It was a little bit frustrating actually. Dad, that was so brilliant. That was so brilliant. So, Feastival's good as well, and Cheese. Come on. But there's something really, really magical about the power of music to move people, and there's nothing quite like it. Just to generate all that emotion and excitement.
But could you still go back to the hotel and drink all night?
Well, the kids decided they want to come to. I mean, once. I mean. One or two of those. It's all about time. So sometimes that's nice, but it's about that's what teenagers want to do, and they apparently, as far as I can tell, they just want to puke themselves to death at every. I mean, actually, I remember being a teenager, and those teenage parties, the level of mayhem that ensues at teenage parties puts anything that happened in the Blur years to shame. Actually, that's when you're just finding out where the limits are, and how much can I drink and. It's so just helping the kids to find a balance, and how do you be irresponsible responsibly? How do you find a balance? That is, I guess, one.
Have you found a balance in life yourself?
Well, no. I mean, I think a farm and a family are wonderfully balancing factors. Someone asked me the other day, how do you keep it real for your kids? You're obviously, you're obviously living a kind of unusual life, how do you keep it real for you? Because my kids keep me real. You know, I think that a family is an anchor, because no matter how brilliant you are at Wembley, you still have to come home and wash up and get them out of bed. And
can we just briefly talk about bass in Blur?
Yes.
We talked a little bit about you playing bass, but bass in Blur has quite a sort of I think an unusual role in a way. I think, you know, in that it's very present and it's very rhythmic.
I think there's something really wonderful about bands. It's particularly about bands that have had enough time, have spent a long time playing together. Nowadays, when I was my kid's age, if you wanted to make music, you needed a bass player and a drummer to make music, because you couldn't do it all on your own at the same time. But now in their phones, they've got like drum machines and sequencers, and you can kind of do it on your. You
don't need a bass player. But
no. But there's some. It's like you need different ingredients in cookery. It's like having just a mixture of kind of personalities. You kind of need a salt, mustard, vinegar, pepper. There's something about people making music together in a kind of visceral way that is really, really special if it's the right combination of people. I mean, you know, Graham's guitar playing, he's the best guitar player I've ever heard. You know, even when he was drinking all night, I've never heard him play a wrong note. You know, he's incapable or singing out of tune, and he's such a brilliant foil for Damon's kind of songwriting impetus. And so just being in that mix and just playing off of both of them. It's just some. As I said, it just happens straight. It's like having some people are really easy to talk to, and some people you can't talk to. You know, it's similar. There's comparisons with falling in love. It's almost a sort of subconscious thing. You can't premeditate it. It's just like, you know, some people you meet and really good stuff happens, and that musically you could get the right combinations of personalities together. I don't know how it works.
I mean, the reason I said I thought it was about sort of friendship was because, you know, by the end of it, you've realised that these are the people who are closest to you.
Yes, and so we've been through so much. We were nights, the same four people who met when we were, you know, 19. Now, you know, all these years later.
So you want this to carry on, don't you?
I think
you're sort of back in love with it.
Oh, I never stopped loving it. I guess there's always a question of, like, I think if stuff isn't kind of evolving or growing, as I say on the farm, any business, if it's not growing, it's time to call it a day, walk away gracefully. I never thought we'd top Glastonbury 2009. I thought that was the first time we got back together. But those Wembley shows we did this summer were just it was just no question the best shows we've ever done.
And none of that dynamic pricing nonsense that Oasis have got into.
They're doing a big old tour. I think the fact that we just did. It was only 20 shows or something. You know, it wasn't loads and loads. And I think that's the first time we've ever got to the end of an album or tour cycle without at least one of the band just going, no, never again. So I think the fact that I think you have to continue to grow and evolve if you don't want to just become a kind of your own tribute band. Do you know what you have?
You've got to wait for the next moment, I suppose, which might be in another few years.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, what a lovely magical thing to be able to dip in and out of occasionally, and hopefully if we can do it kind of with respect and not milk it. Then hopefully we can just keep coming back to it, and it'll be a magical thing that we can keep coming back to for the rest of our lives.
Just on farming, I mean, you mentioned your Jeremy Clarkson's neighbour.
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously become very vocal on farming.
Yeah.
You're very not political. I mean, it's funny, Damon's been on Channel 4 News loads, talking about all sorts of issues. Dave Roundtree's a Labour politician. You're not really political at all. But I mean, what do you make of what's been going on?
When does the inheritance tax kick in?
I'm not even sure. You'd have to check. I think probably next year.
So I'm slightly.
You've got a while,
I'm slightly concerned my children are going to try and kill me before before that kicks in.
Well, you can just give your farm to them, and you'll be fine because you'll live 7 years.
Daddy slipped on some cheese. It's been a terrible accident. No, I'm quite stoic and keeping it light. I'm all about the good times.
And are you friends? Are you friends and neighbours with?
I love Jeremy to bits. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah.
Good. So what's next?
Next, it's Christmas, baby. Yeah. Well, I mean, Christmas. Yeah, I'm going to hang my cheese. This is literally the last thing I've got to do, and I'm going home for Christmas. So, yeah.
So, if you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
They have 3-hour lunch breaks in France, don't they? That'd be good.
With French food?
Yeah. Everyone should be made to go home at lunchtime, buy cheese and cook lunch.
Alex James, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.